Hello friends, this is not Otts, this is Bran, and today we're going to be talking about maps that failed in their reworks. I was thinking about the recent Haddonfield rework that happened last patch because honestly, it's a pretty nice rework all things considered. This map is now on its second rework in history, which is kind of explaining the tormented past of this map and how hard it has been for behavior to be able to get it into a good spot. The last patch that made it super problematic was that the houses had a lot of double god windows, which made it very abysmal to chase even for some of the strongest M2 killers in the game, but survivors didn't really like it either because the streets were just a big old dead zone. Now the double god windows have been removed and the dead zones in the street have been replaced with a lot of path pallets. The issue kind of being is that it does kind of seem to err on the killer side. The jury's still out on that, but especially if you're playing a killer that can circumvent the path pallets pretty easily, it kind of ends up in a place where a lot of survivors are not having a good time. But like I said, still a fairly recent rework, but it's a vast improvement over how the map has been previously. But today I don't want to focus on map reworks that actually went well, but instead I want to focus about map reworks that actually didn't really help that much and desperately need another one. So let's go ahead and get into maps that failed in their reworks. First off, we're going to start with one that probably surprises nobody, and this is Badham, the entire realm. Badham had a previous rework, but this really only added breakable walls and updated the aesthetics. The map largely remained the same, even though it desperately needed changes. The problem with Badham is that the map still has a tremendous problem of having 3 main buildings in a shack all together in one singular map, and this is consistent across all of its iterations, all 5 of them. This, in addition to having a lot of path tiles in between these resources, make it one of the most abysmal realms to play on killer in the game. What would we do to fix this? Well, we have 5 variations of Badham, so let's put them to good use. Let's split up the main buildings among them. Have the main building of the school always spawn, but have the other buildings you get based on what version you get. So we'll put the House of Pain on one, the double 2-story on the other, that sort of thing. That way it's actually spread out, it gives the map some variety and doesn't feel like you're playing the same map all the time, and also prevents you from getting 3 main buildings and a shack all in one map. Next up, we have the game, also known as a meat packing plant, also known as Gideon. Similarly to Badham, the game has been reworked before, but was also mostly only just adding breakable walls and updating the graphics, not much else. The game's main problem was its egregiously high pallet count, most of these pallets being safe or outright just god pallets, and there's plenty of them all around. So what do we do to fix this? The game has a couple formal tiles that can spawn downstairs, and I would definitely like to see more of these. The map is also infamous for having next to no window play, so perhaps replacing some of these unbalanced pallets with windows would be wise where appropriate. Next up is Ormund. It's funny because Ormund got a rework, nerfing it from literally the strongest map in the game. If you played on old Ormund, well, you're entitled to financial compensation because that map was probably the strongest map in the history of Dead by Daylight, at least for Survivor. The main building was better than it is now. The whole map was essentially one connected loop. It was an absolute nightmare. However, new Ormund is really not that much better. Some problems carried over from the old version, like the main building being so large that it cuts off most of the map. The main building is also still incredibly strong with 2 god pallets, strong windows, and filler pallets. Having access to this anywhere on the map is also incredibly good for survivors. Also worth noting, this is probably the strongest balanced landing map in the game, as flying off this will give you access to about any loop that you would like. So how would we fix Ormund? The main building likely needs to shrink, so it is not able to block off most of the map. Additionally, we can go the route of Wretched Shop by making the map slightly bigger, but making the main building weaker because now we can put it in non-central areas. This would obviously need some pallet count reductions in tow, but it would be a wise way to keep it fun for both sides. Next up, we have Eerie of Crows. Eerie's rework is almost comical in a sense because Eerie was nerfed in size because the map was so oppressive for killer, but as a result, the map somehow became even more oppressive. The idea was that if the overall size was nerfed, killers could reach areas to pressure easier. However, what actually ended up happening was the incredibly tile-intense map just pushed all of its resources very close together, making a sort of super loop around most of the map. You'll find the occasional sandpit or dead zone or graveyard plot spawn, but otherwise you're never hard pressed to ever run out of resources here. In addition to this, safe pallets often spawn straight into shack. Yes, I do mean plural. It's quite atrocious. What do? It's a pretty simple fix. Cut down the amount of resources that this map can spawn. Chaining tiles together is a huge survivor skill expression, and right now it's pretty autopilot on this map. Next up, to nobody's surprise, we have Garden of Joy. I almost didn't even include Garden of Joy because, like, their changes were so minute that I could barely consider this a rework. They rearranged some breakable walls in the main building, reoriented some pallet spawns here and there, but other than that, it's almost basically the same map that it's always been. So much so that even Behavior themselves have said they plan to revisit this rework in the future. So what to do about this is pretty straightforward. The main culprit here being the main building. It has a god window that absolutely has to go. Probably put a break wall next to it if you can't do that. Also, it would be smart to put a way to circumvent implement the vault upstairs next to the generator, so it's not a free escape for survivors that are doing that safely upstairs. In addition, the back of the map, I'm talking about from the shack to the parking lot loop, still spawns as largely one connected tile all the way across the back of the map. Breaking this up would be beneficial. Next, we're covering a whole realm again, talking about the Crotus Pren maps. Crotus Pren, outside of Badham, has been infamously one of the roughest realms for Killer, featuring very large maps with very strong main buildings. There's not a lot to love about going here. For Destroyed Board specifically, the amount of resources in the main building needs to be cut down. There's a multitude of pallets in main, a lot being safe in addition to good windows. It should have some of these resources, not all of them. In addition, the cubby spots in the map need to be cut, just like Groaning Storehouse 2 did in its iteration, in order to make it easier to traverse the map. For Father Campbell's in specific, the God window in main building should not be allowed to spawn. God windows are very outdated and should not be in the game any longer. Furthermore, the shack on this map always has a consistent tile spawn connecting straight into it. This tile should be spaced a little bit farther away from shack, so it's a much fairer area to play in that you can't just tie them together very easily. Lastly, we're going to be doing Gas Heaven, which is a funny one to end on because it's another map that inspired me to even make this video, is because Gas Heaven used to be pretty awful thanks to the massive car walls that blocked off parts of the map, making it very nasty to traverse. The car walls were broken up in the rework, but the main building got an extreme buff that essentially replaced the car walls as the new annoying thing that made that map pretty unfun to play. What they did was place a breakable wall at the front doorway and open up a doorway at the back of the garage. This makes the main building an incredibly strong loop, allowing survivors to loop the front window over and over and over. Even if the killer starts to catch up, there's tons of pallets in and around the building, so they can just opt to loop those instead even if the killer does catch up. This is thankfully a very easy fix, just revert the main building. The main building was already fairly good before the rework, just not obnoxiously so. So put the breakable wall back at the garage at the very least to keep the loop from being abused. So that is my list of maps that failed in their reworks. Was there something on here that you were expecting to see that did not make the list, or is there something on the list that you think is actually a pretty fine map to loop on? Let me know down in the comments below. But that's gonna be it for today's video, friends. Thank you so much for watching, but I do upload daily, so I will see you tomorrow. But if I do not, I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye.